All right, guys, good afternoon and welcome to the LocknCharge and Synnex webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's webinar, Smarter Device Management and Workflows with former K-12 and University Tech leader. We are really excited to have both Vince and Will join us today, so thank you very much. I'd like to begin by introducing our speakers. In partnership with Synnex, we have Will Reed, who is the Education Program Manager at Synnex, and we are really excited to have him participate in this webinar and offer his unique expertise on mobile device management from his time as a former CTO at Pulaski County Special School District, as well as the former Director of Technology at Texas Tech University.
Thanks, Natalie. I appreciate that. I'm excited to be here. LocknCharge and Synnex are sort of behind the scenes partners that work hard to deliver excellent ed tech products to customers like you all. So I'm really excited to partner with LocknCharge and do this webinar.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. We also have Vince O'Rourke here. Vince is our LocknCharge Customer Success Manager, and he has over 6 years of experience working with K-12 districts on the West Coast, and he's helped really big districts like LAUSD, San Francisco Unified, and Seattle, all up and down the West Coast with their mobile device deployments. So now, before I let the speakers begin, I'd like to just go over a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's event. Everyone's lines have been muted to eliminate any background noise. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to the speakers by typing them into the chat pod. And as at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that little chat bubble icon, and just click to open that. You may send your questions at any time during the webinar, and we will address them during the Q&A session at the end. A recording of today's webinar will be sent out afterwards, and we encourage you to share it with your interested colleagues who could not make it today. So now, without further ado, here's Vince.
Wonderful. Thank you, Natalie, for that. And thanks for hosting. And Will and I are very excited to be engaging in this discussion with all of you today. We've got people from all over the country. So welcome, everybody. I wanted to just sort of level set what we're going to go into, why we're here today, as well as get into some content and applications to why we're here today a little bit later, sort of the meat of the discussion. But first, I want to level set on what we're not going to talk about. We are not going to engage in a discussion today about a solution in response to COVID-19 and pandemic. The reason is because I'm sure you've been on enough of those webinars, number one. Number two, the reason is because this is not going to be the only stumbling block we're going to experience in the future in education. As we all know, if this last year and a half has really taught us anything, it's that we just don't know what's going to come down the pike. We don't know what hindrances we're going to be experiencing that either disrupt learning or that get in the way of our community's access to learning. There are so many factors that we as an organization now are focused on future-proofing solutions and providing a solution that no matter the environment, no matter the challenge, there is something that you can use in your infrastructure that continually will provide value to you. And it's not something that's just a response to one problem. So I just wanted to start out by saying that we're all going to be specifically focused on, of course, the short-term solution, but as well as what the future is going to look like and how we can be ready. So what we are going to talk about today, specifically with device deployment, are the hidden inefficiencies that are happening right under our nose when it comes to device deployment. We have learned that device is definitely the mechanism now. That's how we're going to use our instruction time, is through that mechanism of a device. And now the student and the educator and our administrative staff and everybody now has those devices to do their work throughout the day. Sometimes they now take them home, right? Sometimes they keep them at school. There's a bunch of different environments, but how we actually deploy those devices to students, to educators, to substitutes, and receive them back, how we do a break fix program, how we facilitate the pickup and drop off of all these things, it's usually been a manual process. So now we're trying to find a better system to do that, a better system to centralize that process, to make it secure, to make it on demand, allow it to interoperate maybe with the software system. We just need that next level of evolution with our infrastructure. So with that being said, now I kind of want to move into the actual solution. Will, before I do that, is there anything you want to add maybe as a footnote just on in the environment of device deployment before we get started?
You know, I think probably just one of the things that I would add is just, I think that, everybody needs to keep an open mind when it comes to devices, because, we've because of COVID-19, districts have had to go to a one-to-one, and anytime you add a one-to-one initiative into an environment, the demand for technology just grows from there. So there's always these little things here and there, that come up, and I think LocknCharge, I think some of the solutions here that we'll talk about today, they could be solutions for many other things besides for just devices. So definitely keep an open mind.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks for that. All right, Jen, if you want to go ahead and turn on the camera, we have, I want to give you a brief overview of the actual tower solution. It's called a FUYL tower. And this FUYL tower is very similar to like an Amazon Locker approach. The idea is that there's individually lockable bays, and this is the hardware piece that kind of goes in tandem with the cloud piece. And I'll get into the applications later because I want to screen share and actually show you our dashboard. But before we do that, I just wanted to kind of give you a glance of the tower. There we go. Thank you. So we have a 15 bay on the left and a 5 bay on the right. Again, individually lockable bays. So the point of it is that in each bay, they are locked and secured with a PIN code, and there's a keypad, as you can see, so that individual users can set their own pins in a public charging setting. Sort of like, think of it like a hotel safe in that mode. They can plug devices in, set their own pin, walk away, come back and plug that same pin to retrieve the item, and then it resets for the next user. In each bay are 2 charging ports. There's a USB and a standard wall outlet in each port, in each bay, so universal charging. And the hardware itself only needs a standard wall outlet for power to the wall. There's no special hardwiring needed. The other thing that it is able to do is network connected. So it can actually run on a host of networking capabilities, including 802.1x network. If you'd like to remotely manage it, we have a cloud portal that enables you to do that. That's pretty much all I wanted to talk about on the hardware side, because I think it's better to get into the discussions of how we're going to use it. So now I kind of want to go through about 3 or 4 workflows, and Will and I are kind of talk back on those applications on how it's useful in those workflows, and then I'll screen share and I'll show you kind of how we would do that from our cloud portal dashboard setting. So the first thing I'll say is these always work as a standalone charging station without network connectivity. So if you just plug it into the wall and use it for public charging or on-demand one-to-one charging, it will always work with or without our software. The reason we added the software component, the cloud portal component, is because there are so many other, as Will said, there's so many other use cases for picking up and dropping off devices that need to have remote access to do that. You're not always in the building when those things need to happen. So to sidestep for that, the cloud portal allows you to scale it and put it into multiple environments without needing a manual process to do that. So the first one I want to talk about is the basic one, just deploying and retrieving devices and or hotspots. I don't know if some of you all are still in the mode of deploying hotspots. Some of our schools are. Because the lockers are deep enough size and 3 inches high, 17 inches deep, we have people putting the whole hotspot box and bag into the bay and deploying it through the tower that way. So one of the best applications that we see is putting these in front offices, media centers, or right outside of libraries, right outside of locker rooms, and then actually using our cloud portal to assign a bay to a person and then telling them to go pick up their device in that bay with that pin. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you a real quick application of that. So let's say you have a brand new student on your coming into your high school and they need to pick up a new device. So you'd say, hi, welcome. I have your new device for you and maybe some paperwork for you. Please go to the tower and pick up your device. And so what I've done is I've logged into our LocknCharge account of our cloud portal. So from here, I can access all the towers that are connected on this account. So I'm just going to click on the tower that I'd like the student to go to pick up that device, which is this one. I'm going to pick on an available bay, which is just for me going to be this. Anyone that's green looks like it's available. And then I'm going to go to the users and simply authorize that user and put their name on here. So now Jen is the only person with her PIN that can go to that bay 7 of that tower, and access the contents. So all I would have to do is go back via email, however method of communication you have, or a phone call, and let the student or parent know that the device is ready to be picked up in that bay. The beauty of that is I don't have to schedule it. I don't have to be there to make it happen. I don't have to physically engage with anyone. That can make it a lot more streamlined. If we've noticed anything, is that scheduling has been a real challenge over the past year and a half to make sure everybody is present to do simple things like a device swap. So before we get into the other applications, I want Will to just comment on this one and the dashboard, and Will, tell us what you think about this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vince. So, when it comes to deploying and retrieving devices, it's really interesting because, like you said earlier, there's so many things you can deploy and retrieve, right? I mean, not just devices, hotspots, student IDs, whatever it might be. There's probably every district will have their own needs there. But when you talk about retrieving and deploying devices, at the end of the year, I know we were 7 years into one-to-one when I left my former district, and it's one of those things where you send a whole team out to receive devices, and this is as simple as if you had a bay, you could literally do it. You could literally do it in waves where students, at the beginning, at the end of the year, you could deploy and retrieve devices in waves. Students, like you said, new students that come in, we know that, we know every district has new students coming in and out all the time, so a lot of times if your IT department, it takes forever to get a device, configured and then get it out to the school. It'd be great to have maybe 10 devices out there configured and ready to go, so that all the district, all the school had to do was just stick it in the lockbox, and go. And so I think there's a lot of applications for this that make a whole lot of sense. Like you said earlier, they could be anywhere. They could be in the media center. They could be in the front office. It could be by the locker room. There's so many applications for this particular format.
Mm-hmm. Specifically, we find wherever you have high traffic area, that's where you want to disrupt it with the tower. The other thing we're trying to avoid, as we all are in this hybrid environment, is reducing crowding. We're trying to reduce crowding and keep to physical distancing guidelines so we can reopen appropriately. And one of the consistent problems is if everybody huddles around a station to try to get their device all at once, or forms this deep line, we have problems. So using a quicker solution like this that can kind of reduce the crowding, break up the bottlenecks, and divert traffic away from each other, we find to be very, very effective. The other thing I wanted to show was one school's application. So San Francisco Unified, let me pull up a picture for you, wanted to use this specifically for their educator devices. The reason is because they had several hundred educators coming in and out over the summer, and it was just such a taxing event every time they needed a new device. The executive director at San Francisco Unified let us know that about 15-minute, every time an educator needed a device, it was about a 15-minute interruption. And it said it was consistently happening every time. And that's a different workflow even than your students, right? That's on top of what your students are experiencing or your parents. So they took towers and they put them in their DO specifically for their educators. And I want to show a picture of kind of how they did that. So they put 4 15-bay towers side by side in their district office. So that gives them 60 bays. And that when they did that, they were able to just divert all the questions, if it's a broken device that needed a repair, a warranty support issue, if it was a brand new educator, if it was somebody leaving the district or an administrator, your other staff members that also need access to devices, all those were diverted to a FUYL tower. And since he put it in a central location that they're already used to going into, it wasn't a disruption to their workflow. In fact, helped their workflow. So we hadn't sort of quantify the downtime that they're experiencing, which we've seen all over the board. But he was saying that it was about a 5-day downtime between when device was broken and new device was back in the hands, or what device was needed and device was back in the hands. And he quantified that it went down to as fast as 1 day using this FUYL tower solution. Because again, no schedule needed. You don't have to physically be there. If you put it in a place with better building access, you can have more hours of access instead of just the times when your staff are in the office. So it just kind of streamlined that entire process. And then at a later date, his techs could come back into it and recoup those broken devices and work on those, or get them ready and configured for the next user. So I just want to make sure to show that picture. One other one that I wanted to show was sort of a kiosk solution, and we're going to get into loaners in a second. But this is a great application that one of our districts did in the Chicago area. And they created sort of a pickup kiosk, if you will, that this is for their replacements specifically, for their warranty replacements. But they created this, they took a field tower and sort of created a central spot to send everybody to. And they used our cloud portal like I showed. And every time a student needed a new device, / cables, peripherals, anything else that they needed, they actually used the field tower to distribute. And that way they just went up to a non-managed section where there wasn't a physically engaging interaction, and did all of that swapping there. All of it can be tracked as well on our event log. So if you're looking for sort of inventory updates or that tracking of who has what device where, that's being done on the back end for you. So I thought this was a great example of how they used the panda, which was there with their mascot. So they kind of incorporated it and made it their own in their school. It was a great application for a way to do that. And this could be a good segue into the loaner program as well. Well, the one thing I want to talk about are substitutes. So, we've seen an interesting shift with this one-to-one, and our educators having their own devices that are not all the time PC or like stationary. They're usually mobile now. When they're gone, guess what? Their device is gone. So the sub needs a loaner, right? That sub needs a device for that assignment. So we've got a couple very large districts who have sort of quantified that problem in itself and decided that a fuel tower, even just a 5 bay for a smaller site or a 15 bay for a larger site, specifically used for substitutes, could be very helpful, where you just say, hello, welcome to North Thurston, go to Bay 2, grab your device for your 2-day assignment. And then that they still have access to that bay, even when they're teaching, right? That they're gonna have an active assignment. So they come back, they drop their stuff off at the end, and they don't have to kind of go find, who do I get my device from to do my assignment, and that whole problem. So does that make sense for subs, Will?
That makes absolute sense. I mean, look, I come from a larger district, and I can tell you that there are schools out there that probably have 15 subs a day. It's difficult because, like you said earlier, teachers now, they have mobile devices for the most part. So their devices are going home with them. And so the sub gets there and they've got nothing. So, any type of situation like that, where you're dealing with subs, or you're dealing with students that don't bring their device charged, they forgot their device at home, or it's broken at home and they didn't want to bring it that day, or whatever it might be. It really creates a much easier workflow. And with media center specialists, so many times that's a secondary job for them. They're busy enough doing other things. So it's one of those situations where you can really save a lot of downtime by setting up a loaner program like that. It's just easier. You kind of take a lot of the human power out of it, so to speak, and it makes things more efficient for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So to put some numbers on that, we tried to quantify the amount of swapping we're doing a day, and in about a 2,000 person site, 30 to 40 devices a day are what we're seeing as being exchanged. Now that includes broken, repaired, loaned, check-in, check-out type of things, new students, people leaving. That's all that together. But if you quantify, a 15-minute interaction every time something has to happen, and that's how many you're doing a day, we could be talking about an entire person's job, an entire role. If you sprinkle that out throughout everybody across all the sites, all the, where you're focusing on, especially high schools where you've got a higher demand, then it's a real hindrance. It's a real problem. And we just haven't had, I don't think there's been access to a sort of better way to do it before, other than using your media center techs who are already kind of in the environment. But if you provide that media center tech with this resource, they can go back to their primary duty and make sure that that's done and organized really well. It's a lot more. It's also exaggerated because of the one-to-one sort of more shift that we're all experiencing. So even though, I guess we're talking about break fix now. So even though people are maybe weren't as concerned about a break fix program before, it's going to be a different ballgame now, because there's going to be more incidences of breakage rates now that they're having that device all day long every day. And it may be that you want to just give them a new one and not worry about an on-site repair like on demand. Maybe you want to give them a new one in the background. But inventory isn't always on your side when it comes to devices, as we've seen. So again, another way to speed up the process is have a tower, have a loaner sort of ready to go. I guess you call it a loaner, but in that case, it would be your new device kind of stacked in that tower. You simply put a student's name on that bay and say, yes, I know you got a broken device, go pick up your new one. And then what you could also do is, with that network piece that I talked about earlier in our cloud, is we have an open API on our cloud portal, which enables you to directly connect to your help desk system. So we have several school districts that want to focus on interoperability between all their software systems. And one of the best ways to do that is, if your help desk ticket, think of this, could be submitted with a break, like let's say they need a new device, have that ticket that's submitted with your current help desk system talk directly to the bay, and then the bay itself assigns the user, provides the credentials, goes back to the user, tells them how to do that, and then just fires off an email notification to the administrators that that's happening. What you're doing is you're removing that need to have anybody manage that, and you're fully automated at this point. I think that's very important for districts that are kind of trying to find a way to make it even faster and more accessible for their community. Sometimes we don't know how to connect those different software components that we have out there. So we created it to go as far as you want it to go, with the open gates, to make sure that if you wanted to create the fastest 100% automated approach, you could do that. Do you see that as a good value as well on the back end?
I do. To me, the interesting thing about that is it kind of creates sort of a one-stop shop, if you will, rather than having to create a help desk ticket and then, send someone out with a loaner, or send a loaner to the school, or do a bunch of communication back and forth trying to, get everything. It's much, much simpler. It's as simple as, a student takes their device down that's broken, they drop it off in one of the lockers. They have a code to get into probably a locker next to it that's got a loaner in it, and it's done. It's easy in, easy out. It's all in one place. I mean, it makes for such a more efficient workflow, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And that's especially if you're scaling. So customers of mine, like Los Angeles Unified, that's specifically what they're looking for, to make sure that they don't even have to have one other step for their community, but they have even better, faster, easier access to those towers. So the last thing I thought we should talk about too is simple, but it's very important. And that's some of our community members and students and families, we're not sure if they have access to like consistent power at home. Some of our socioeconomically disadvantaged students or family members, their families don't want to have that responsibility or that accountability on that device if something were to go missing with that device that they took home, and they don't want to be accountable to pay for the cost differentiators there, or they just simply don't have good access to power. Some of them are going to places in the community to charge their devices, as we've seen. So I have some districts that have gotten very wise, and they've started using some of their CARES Act or HEROES Act funding specifically for towers to provide secure power to some of these students. So almost like giving them a bay, and it's always their bay, and they put it in a family resource center, and they put it in a front office, or they put it in somewhere in the community even. Maybe it's even a fire station or a public library where there's extended hours. And that student has consistent access to charging. They can put other things in there instead of just a device. They can house other items in there. They know their device is always going to be charged, and they don't have, the parent or the family member doesn't have to feel the weight of that responsibility on the device, because it's not necessarily coming home with them all night to charge. So, and that's not necessarily, again, that's not something that needs a bunch of networking and ability, but I don't think it's insignificant. I think that's something that we still have to be mindful about. And make sure that we offer that as another component, as a resource to our community.
I absolutely agree, 100%, Vince. I can tell you, when we started our one-to-one, we had so many parents that said, hang on, I don't want this device. Even when we said, we're not charging you a deposit, we're not, like, look, it's okay. And They didn't want the device at home for a lot of different reasons, right? Sometimes it's economic. Sometimes it's, I don't allow my student access to the internet at home or a computer at home, right? I mean, there's a lot of different reasons that parents choose not to want that device at home. And as a school district, we always have to find a way to make that work. And that's a difficult, if you've got a media center specialist checking out devices every morning and every evening, I mean, you're really eating up into their time at that point, so this is a great way of doing that, and I think, when you talk about public charging and overnight charging, it's a way for students to not have to worry about it. It's a way for parents not to have to worry about it. These are things that just make sense, because again, if you have a one-to-one, you've probably already starting to see this. It's definitely coming. Once a few students break some devices and parents have to pay for anything on that device, or maybe they don't have to pay, they still don't want that device at home anymore a lot of times. So that's just something to think about for sure.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, those were sort of the top 4 workflows that I wanted to kind of go over with everybody today. There's so many more workflows. There's so many more applications. The beauty of this is once you think of it like a parcel locker, once you put it in an area, I've seen people deploying books through their libraries, uniforms for their after school programs and sports teams, just a whole host of things that can fit in the towers. It's really rewarding to kind of see how everybody, again, to that future proofing environment, that getting ready for any environment. That's how we want to see it used best. So I just kind of wanted we have tons of other carts and stations and other solutions that LocknCharge has put together to kind of answer that future-proof environment. But today was specifically on the FUYL tower approach and how this locker sort of setting is really going to be helpful for us in the future and now. So I think we'd like to, Natalie, give it back to you and start answering some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We got one question in the chat pod, so I invite anyone else to submit your questions right there at the bottom. But let's start out with Angie's question. She's saying, does the password change after every use?
I can take that. The beauty is the password does not have to change after every use. So what we've done is we've created a way where in that user portal that I was in, once you put a user in there with their first, last name, and their email, and you create a pin right there. So that pin follows that user wherever they go throughout their entire tenure at your sites. So all you're doing as an administrator is putting the person's name on the bay, and that pin will follow that. If they ever think that pin is compromised or you want to change it, of course, you can go in and manually change it, or you can have it also be randomized if you prefer. But the password then will stay attached to the user for the length of time that you want it to. Good question.
So Vince and Will, we had a couple questions submitted ahead of time, and one of the ones I thought that both of you could kind of address is, why would someone use public charging or use the FUYL tower for public charging, and what are the benefits there?
I'll give a quick little footnote of what we're seeing right now with public charging is one, everybody's got the same device and they've taken it home specifically. We don't know if that was charged the night before, and it probably isn't. We don't know if they forgot that on the way in. And now that same device has to go all day for them, has to go from class A to B for all the events. Sometimes it's even, into a locker room setting where you don't want them to have a device in hand for obvious reasons, but you want it to be able to be securely charged at the same time. So it's more about on-demand charging, letting somebody supplementally charge the rest of that power when they need it and putting it in accessible places. Opening up, everybody knows we've got tons of carts out there. Opening up a cart with 30 devices in there, letting people charge their own stuff leads to problems that we've seen, like people grabbing the wrong device when they pick that up and they go on to their next class because it was all charging together. They look the same. They open it up to log in, realize it's not theirs, and guess what? It's back in help desk hands, or it's thefted. There isn't anything really else that can keep that sort of quick charge on demand in an individually lockable bay ready to go like a tower can. So that's kind of why people would public charge with it. Will, do you have some footnotes to that too?
Yeah, Vince. It's really interesting. Some of the points you hit on there, locker rooms and things like that. Listen, if I had a nickel for every time a Chromebook was broken in PE class, right? Because maybe those students they don't actually have an official locker. They pile them up along the bleachers and what have you. I mean, that'd be a great scenario where where students could put their devices so that they're safe and secure, and they're being charged for, whatever classes come next. Higher ed is a big one. This is, higher ed, there's so much use case for something like that, where students go to the student union building for lunch. They want to go down there and eat lunch. They don't want to carry their device with them. They don't want to wait. Maybe they want to charge it for afternoon classes or evening classes or what have you. But it's a place where they can put that along with other stuff, really, to be honest with you, where they could put that in there. So there's so many different scenarios for charging, even basketball, football, things like that. A lot of students don't go home after class, and they hang around the school campus waiting for that basketball game to start or what have you. And then they're all walking around with backpacks or setting the backpacks down everywhere, or what have you. That's a great scenario too, where hey, look, don't just set your Chromebook down, stick it in a locker so that it's safe and secure and it's being charged.
Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome. One other question real quick, guys, that maybe we can address, and then we'll wrap things up so we can keep everyone's time in mind here is, does the tower have a camera built in, or is there a way to connect a camera to physically track who's coming to the tower? And why would that be something that would be helpful to have?
Absolutely. The tower itself does not have a camera. Generally, we recommend that these be placed under a location that has camera already. Most of our school districts are naturally wanting to do that just to reduce the kind of the incentive for theft or vandalism or anything like that. So, or sometimes even putting up verbiage that just lets people know they're being recorded. We haven't had any issues kind of marrying the actual interactions with the tower and making sure that the right user is using it, because once they're being recorded, that usually keeps any of the problems that we've had down. There's also actual windows into each bay. You can kind of see there. You can't see it too well with the glare, but it's not a totally private bay. As you walk by, you can see the contents. That again has also helped make sure that people are using it ethically and making sure that you don't have to have a camera built in for that because it's too public and too open for people to see. So if you want extra security on it, recommend putting it under a place with camera coverage. Absolutely.
Great. Looks like we just have one more quick question, Vince, that's more kind of logistical. Lynn wants to know, does the user provide the cord? I'm assuming that means.
Yeah, that's an option. The other thing we see is you can put some already kind of pre-cable it for them, so depending on the device and the universality you want to put in there. And there's actually some grommets drilled out the back of each bay to help with airflow. And we recommend, if you pre-cable them, to string them through there and then zip tie them so that your cables don't be borrowed, walk away, which means I'm just going to use this real quick and you'll never see it again, right? So we encourage you to secure those cables if you choose to do that yourself that way, so that it is easier for the user to just have to plug something in and not provide their own cable, but you want to make sure that it's secure as well.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, I really quickly, before we wrap everything up for the day here, is I know you all must be anxiously awaiting the winner of the Amazon gift card. So let me just wanted to let you guys know, for everyone that's here in the room today, I randomly assigned you a number as you kind of logged in and put your name in a list with a number. So I'm going to use a random number generator here to pick a number, and let's see, picked number 5, which is Rebecca. So Rebecca, congratulations. I will be sending you via email. So the email that you put in for your registration and also to log into Zoom here today, you'll be getting your Amazon gift card via email. So again, Vince and Will, thank you so much for your time. I really think this is valuable for everyone to hear today, particularly as they start to plan for the end of the year and beginning of the school year for next time. So you all will receive a follow-up email with the link to view the recording of today's webinar and info how to contact the LocknCharge team. So thank you again, and we will hopefully see you all soon.
Thank you, everybody. Everybody take care.